Thank you for your silence and welcome to this event on the Asian Heritage Month in the month of April. On behalf of the Asian Heritage Committee, I'd like to welcome the distinguished Board of Trustees, Dr. Michael Redmond, and the entire college community to the keynote speaker event, Asian Impact 50, Asian American Leadership and the Justice System. And at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Bill Mullaney, Vice President of Academic Affairs, to open the keynote event.
Thank you, Dr. Cower. On behalf of Bergen Community College's Board of Trustees, some who are in attendance today, as well as our president, Dr. Michael Redmond, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this very special event with our very special guest. This event is hosted by the Office of Multicultural Affairs as part of the college's celebration of Asian American heritage. Events like this highlight what I believe to be the greatest strength of Bergen Community College, namely the incredible diversity of our faculty, staff, and especially our students. As our student population continues to grow increasingly diverse, it will only serve to strengthen the work that we do here and the contribution that the college is able to make to both local and global communities. As a young boy growing up on Long Island, I didn't have much exposure to Asians or Asian Americans, save for the occasional trip to Chinatown in New York City. Fortunately, I was a bookish young boy growing up on Long Island who spent a good deal of time perusing the shelves at my local library. On one of those days, I came across a book that broadened my worldview in ways that I never expected, similar to my experience reading Black Boy by Richard Wright a few years earlier. The book was The Woman Warrior, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Ghosts by Maxine Hong Kingston, a book that I'm sure is familiar to many of you. The negative depiction of Asians in popular culture is well documented. That is when they are not being totally ignored or erased. The publication of Kingston's book was a watershed moment because it allowed a Chinese woman to speak for herself. As a teenage reader, white and male, I remember feeling privileged to be let into this secret world. In Kingston's myth of herself as a training warrior, she advocates for the strength in silence and listening. She powerfully argues that letting there be space and sound for others can be seen as an ethical choice. Among the many powerful women in the novel, one older woman brings her down to the local stream. The older woman says to the author, "The first thing you have to do is learn how to be quiet. If you're noisy, you'll make the deer go without water." The book is many things at once: a woman's story, a primer on the importance of education, a cultural and geographical travelogue, a feminist manifesto, and a Declaration of Independence. Her work paved the way for many other writers who stand on her shoulders: Amy Tan, Jhumpa Lahiri, Bharati Mukherjee, David Henry Hwang, and Ocean Vuong, a young poet that the college hosted last year as part of our literary art series. My exposure to The Woman Warrior is coming full circle this summer when I will be traveling to Asia for the first time, Beijing to be exact, as part of an education immersion experience with the Confucius Institute at New Jersey SUNY University, a trip of a lifetime. In addition to a wealth of knowledge, I promise to bring back gifts for all my friends on the Asian Heritage Committee. Before I depart, I would like to take a moment to recognize someone in the audience. After nearly 6 years at the college, one of our own women warriors will be retiring after a career devoted to fighting the good fight. Dr. Yun Kim, our Vice President of Institutional Effectiveness, is heading to warmer climates to enjoy a life of cocktails and leisure. Among her many contributions to the college, she successfully navigated the college's self-study in 2016 that resulted in the most successful accreditation in Bergen's 50-year history, for which it received full accreditation and 48 special commendations, an unheard of achievement in the world of accreditation. I would ask Dr. Kim to be stand and recognized. Thank you for coming today, and I'll return it now to Dr. Cower. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Attorney General Gurbir Grewal. Gurbir Grewal is a first Attorney General of the state of New Jersey. He's the first South Asian American and also the first Sikh American Attorney General in the United States. Sikhs are a minority religious community who believe in equality irrespective of caste, creed, color, or religion. Gurbir Grewal was formerly the prosecutor of Bergen County of New Jersey. Before becoming the prosecutor, he served as an assistant United States attorney, AUSA, in the Criminal Division of United States Attorney's Office of New Jersey, where he served as the chief of Economic Crime Unit. Grewal is concentrated on protecting interests of New Jersey residents, reducing violent crimes, fighting the opioid epidemic, upholding constitutional rights, and strengthening relationship between police and communities. Grewal is concentrated on all these wonderful projects. Gurbir Grewal graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Foreign Services from the Georgetown University School of Foreign Services and obtained his law degree from the College of William and Mary Marshall Wythe School of Law. He has served as the president of South Asian Bar Association of New York and is a member of New Jersey Asian Pacific American Lawyers Association. He truly understands the problems of Asians. He's described as an independent thinker, a man with a steel backbone who believes the American dream is in fact alive and well in New Jersey for all. Please join me in welcoming Gurbir Grewal from the same stage he was sworn in as a prosecutor. Gurbir Grewal.
Good morning, everyone. So it is such a thrill to be back in Bergen County and this stage again. I want to thank the college, President Redmond, Vice President Mullaney, and Dr. Kaur for inviting me to be here. And I also want to just say I get to speak in a lot of different venues and a lot of different events all across the state, and I've been speaking publicly for some time now. That was by far the only introduction I think ever where someone's pronounced my last name and first name correctly, and how it's supposed to be pronounced. So I appreciate that from Dr. Kaur for that very kind and well enunciated and pronunciated introduction. I'm also incredibly happy to be with all of you this morning for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that for the last 3 months, since I've been Attorney General, I've been commuting 160 miles round trip to Trenton each day from my home in Bergen County. So it was very nice to wake up this morning and take a short 4-mile drive to the college. So anytime you want me back, I'd be happy to skip the ride to Trenton and be back with you. But in all seriousness, I want to note that during my time as Bergen County prosecutor, this institution, as well as this county, including the elected officials, some of whom I see here this morning, Freeholder Zur, Freeholder Sullivan, and others, and the men and women of law enforcement who are here this morning as well, and so many others partnered with me and supported the work we did at the prosecutor's office and really allowed us to become what I think is the premier prosecutor's office in this state. And I'm thankful for them being here and for the support that they've given me over the last number of years. And in particular, right here at Bergen Community College, we did a lot of terrific work together. We produced a public safety announcement detailing the county's opioid epidemic. Tom, who helped me get mic'd up, and others in this room helped produce what I think is a powerful, powerful statement about the state of the county's epidemic and what we're doing to fight it. We also hosted many terrific forums at this college to talk about the epidemic, to talk about bias crimes, to talk about school safety, and so many other topics. And on a personal note, as Dr. Kaur stated, last January when I was officially sworn in as county prosecutor, we had the swearing-in ceremony in this very theater. And so I'm appreciative of all of that partnership and support in this room today. And it's not lost on me that I'm in the position I am in today because of those partnerships forged right here in Bergen County, including at this college. And that's why it's a special honor to be asked to share remarks as part of your 50th anniversary celebrations and as part of this celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and to discuss the accomplishments of Asian Americans over the last 50 years, in particular in the criminal justice system. And over the last 50 years, those contributions have increased, in no small part due to the fact that Asian Pacific Americans are the largest growing ethnic group in this country. Today, more immigrants come to the United States from Asia than from any other part of the world. Today, it's estimated that there are nearly 20 million Asian Americans in the United States, making up close to 6% of the entire population of this country. And if you compare that to 50 years ago, the population of Asian Americans then was close to 1 million, making up 1% of the population of the country. And those growing numbers are reflected right here in New Jersey, where Asian American and Pacific Islanders make up nearly 10% of the state's population. And those numbers, as many of you know, are of course higher right here in Bergen County. And let me share with you what I discovered when I did what any good lawyer would do when preparing for remarks like this, when I went to Wikipedia. In Bergen County, Asian American and Pacific Islanders represent nearly 16% of the county's population. That's second only to Middlesex, where Asian Americans represent 24% of that county's population. Here are some other notable statistics. As of the 2010 census, persons of Korean ancestry made up over 6% of our county's population, which is the highest percentage for any county in the United States. And in Palisades Park, New Jersey, persons of Korean ancestry account for more than 50% of that municipality's population, making it one of the very few majority-minority municipalities in this country. In Bergenfield, New Jersey, Filipino Americans comprise nearly 17% of the population, according to the last census. Now, with these numbers, one would expect Asian Americans well represented across all sectors. And that's certainly the case in the private sector, where Asian Americans have thrived. In business, we are the CEOs of companies like Google, where Sundar Pichai serves as CEO, Microsoft, where Satya Nadella is the CEO, Adobe Systems, where Shantanu Narayan is the CEO. Think about that for a moment. The CEOs of Google, of Microsoft, and of Adobe are all Asian Americans. That means between using Google to do my research for this remark today, these remarks, Adobe to open up the results of that research, and Microsoft Word to type my remarks for today, the technology that I touched and used, and likely that you touch and use in your daily lives, all from companies where Asian Americans serve as the CEOs. And that list goes on. At PepsiCo, it's Indra Nooyi, who serves as the CEO. At MasterCard, Ajay Banga, a fellow Sikh American. At Teaneck, New Jersey-based Cognizant, a Fortune 100 information technology company right here in Bergen County, Frank D'Souza, an Asian American, serves as CEO. Asian Americans are now also making inroads as the leaders, the presidents, and deans of some of America's most prestigious colleges and universities. In fact, just this past April, Debashish Dutta was named the chancellor of our own state university, Rutgers. We are at the pinnacle of scientific research, medicine, mathematics, economics, and scholarship. We are well represented in journalism, in the media, in the arts, and we've achieved success in government, although not in representative numbers. At the federal level today, Asian Americans serve as congresspeople, as senators, as cabinet members, and in fact, just this past Friday, we lost a pioneer, former U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka of Hawaii. He was 93 years old and spent 36 years of his life in the United States Senate standing up for the rights of Asian Americans, and particularly Asian American servicemen who fought and gave their all for this country during World War II, but were discriminated against when they returned home. At the state level, we've served as governors, we serve as legislators, and yes, and as attorneys general. And at the local level, we are your mayors, like my good friend Ravi Bala, the mayor in Hoboken, and your council people. Now, by all of those accounts, you would think that Asian Americans are also thriving and well represented in the law and in the justice system. But unfortunately, the numbers tell a different story. According to a recent groundbreaking study led by Yale University Law School called A Portrait of Asian Americans in the Law, there's cause for serious concern. While the number of Asian American lawyers has gone up from 20,000 in the year 2000 to 53,000 today, accounting for nearly 5% of all lawyers, Asian Americans are confronting numerous challenges to get to the top ranks of the profession, to get to the bench, to government careers, especially positions within the criminal justice system. And let me just share a couple of the study's more troubling findings with you. Although Asian Americans make up 10% of the graduates of the top 30 law schools in 2015, they comprise only 6.5% of all federal judicial law clerks, which is a common pathway to get to the bench or to government service. And Asian Americans are more likely than other groups to work in law firms or in business and are least likely to work in government. In fact, very few Asian Americans reported that gaining a pathway into government service or politics was the reason that they went to law school in the first place. And while Asian Americans have been the largest minority at major law firms, they have the highest attrition rate and the lowest ratio of partners to associates. And similarly, although a significant number of Asian Americans serve as line prosecutors or government attorneys across the United States in various jurisdictions, they are not well represented at the supervisory level. In 2016, there were only 3 Asian American United States attorneys in this country, 3 out of 93. And that number holds steady today. In 2014, of the elected district attorneys nationwide, there were 4 out of 2,400. Among the 50 attorneys general in the United States today, there are 3 of us. And despite recent progress, only approximately 25 Asian Americans, 25 nationwide, serve as Article III judges. That's less than 3% of the entire federal judiciary. And Asian Americans comprise 2% of state judges nationally. In this state, these numbers are even more troubling and even more confounding. In New Jersey, not a single Asian American federal judge, and on the state court bench, only 6 judges out of 400, or about 1.4%. And across law enforcement ranks, Asian Americans nationally comprise 2% of law enforcement. And that number holds in this state, where Asian Americans comprise 2% of the New Jersey State Police and 2% of our municipal police departments. Now, the next logical question you should be asking yourself is, should we be concerned by this lack of Asian American representation in the justice system? And my simple answer to each of you is very, very concerned. And there are a number of reasons for that concern. There are studies that speak more eloquently than I can to the benefits of diversity and inclusion in the criminal justice system. These studies speak about the trust and understanding that diversity brings and promotes. They speak about how diversity can encourage victims to come forward, about how diversity in the justice system helps citizens feel that they will be treated fairly in their interactions with law enforcement, about how people are more likely to trust the outcomes of a system that is diverse and reflects them. But rather than share with you details of those studies, I want to share with you a couple of personal experiences that I think highlight the importance of diversity and inclusion in the justice system, and really in public service as well. Now, this is not a new rule for me. When I was Bergen County prosecutor, I had this same rule. I did not read social media. I did not read comments on NorthJersey.com or NJ.com, not because I don't like those newspapers or news outlets. It was because, first of all, I'm not going to live my life or guide my office by smiley faces, hearts, and other emojis and other comments on social media. And it's also not because I don't have thick skin, because I do. It's really because I think those comments, because in those sort of anonymous corners of the internet, right, in those dark recesses of the internet, people feel so comfortable expressing their true bigoted feelings. And so what I wanted to do with you today was just share with you a couple of comments that we had pulled from social media at the Attorney General's office. And many of these speak to how I don't look like the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, how Attorney Generals shouldn't look like me, how I don't look American. But here are a few more alarming ones, I would say. Quote, "When I see someone like him, I need to get my gun," close quote. Another wrote, quote, "Damn raghead, F you," close quote. A third wrote, quote, "Ragheads are for target practice," close quote. And again, these are just a couple of examples. I'm told there are hundreds, if not thousands more, and hundreds and thousands of more likes of each of these comments. And I hope you could begin to understand why I don't guide my office by these comments and why I don't read these comments. But here's the thing, while those comments are troubling as I share them with you, they are no longer confined to those dark corners or recesses of the internet. They are no longer hidden behind the anonymity of pseudonyms or other handles on Twitter or on social media. Today, in the moment we're living in, people feel more and more comfortable to share these types of comments in the public square. From law enforcement, we see more and more that people today are openly questioning the loyalty and the patriotism of their fellow citizens because of what they look like, how they worship, where they come from, the color of their skin, how they love. And tragically, we have seen this rising tide of hate and intolerance really manifest itself in physical violence in places around this country and death. And while we haven't seen that here in New Jersey, we have seen an uptick in bias crimes and bias incidents. We released a report very recently. We're usually a year or so behind in releasing these reports, but in 2016, we saw 417 bias incidents in this state reported to state law enforcement. That's an increase of 14% from the year before. And the 2017 numbers, which we're in the process of verifying as we speak, are going to be far higher. And the trends we're seeing in 2018 are going to be even higher. And of all the trends that we're seeing in this space, perhaps, and sadly so, the most alarming trend is that we are seeing more and more juveniles, youth, at the high school level, middle school level, engage in this type of conduct. It's just become all too commonplace across this state, across this country, and even across this county for kids to spray paint swastikas in schools, to spray paint bigoted comments in schools. It's become all too commonplace for kids to physically threaten or challenge their fellow students or in cyberspace based on their differences or where they come from. And so I think, as many of you in this room can likely appreciate, that pendulum of civility and of decency and of respect and tolerance has swung so far back in the wrong direction. And the next question becomes, what do we do? What can we do? How do you counter this rise in hate and intolerance? How do you counter this increasingly hateful rhetoric that we're seeing in this state and this country? For me, I think one way you do that is by increasing diversity and inclusion in the justice system and in the public sector. Representation matters. You see, I chose a career in public service, first and foremost, to give back to a country that gave me and my family so many opportunities to live the American dream and to other families like mine. But the second reason that I became a federal prosecutor over 15 years ago in Brooklyn was because I wanted to show others that you didn't have to look a certain way, you didn't have to believe a certain way, you didn't have to worship a certain way, that you could look like me and still be committed and love this country. And that's one of the main reasons I became a federal prosecutor. It was a tremendously rewarding position to be a federal prosecutor, but it gave me the opportunity to challenge people's misperceptions and to really shatter stereotypes. Every time I got up in front of a grand jury to present an indictment or before a jury at trial, every time I presented a case, every time I met with victims of crimes, every time I met with law enforcement agents, every time I participated in outreach events and spoke with school groups, every time I said that I represented the United States, I got to say it looking the way I do. And it was my hope that in the process of doing that, maybe I changed the mind of at least one person, like one of those internet commentators who thought that you had to believe or look a certain way to be American. And that's one of the main reasons I couldn't turn down and pursue the position of Bergen County prosecutor, and that's one of the main reasons I could not turn the position down that I hold today. It allows me to do the same thing in a far more public and a far more far-reaching way, while allowing me to give back and reaffirm my commitment to public service. And so how do we ensure that there is diversity in the justice system? Well, it's my hope that people in this room, that as more and more people from diverse backgrounds find their way to the law, to a prosecutor's office, or to law enforcement, it will have a multiplying effect, that others who didn't think that such careers were possible for them will be attracted to and encouraged to pursue such careers. And as individuals from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, begin to fill these positions, that these positions will begin to reflect what this country looks like, what this state truly looks like. And as that momentum of diversity builds, I hope that seeing people from so many diverse backgrounds occupying these frontline positions, public service positions, positions that are so intertwined and associated with what it means to be American, will in the end help to increase tolerance and acceptance. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, for me, they are not ends or they're not goals, but rather constant processes that we all must commit ourselves to, and processes that will enable us to break down barriers, address misconceptions, and counter stereotypes. And in the end, I think diversity and inclusion among our ranks, in the justice system, in law enforcement, in prosecutors' offices, on the bench, ensures that our professions are more productive, that our justice system is more just, because we are more in touch with and better understand the people we serve when we reflect them in our ranks. And importantly, again, as I said earlier, crime victims feel more comfortable coming forward to report crimes when they feel comfortable with or believe that they are represented among the ranks of law enforcement. And so while we've made strides in certain areas, and while I'm honored to serve in the position I now do, we clearly have more work to do when it comes to diversity and inclusion across all sectors, among the partnership ranks at firms, in boardrooms, in public service, especially among the judiciary, which is unfortunately not at all reflective of the diversity in this country. But I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because we're having this discussion today. I'm hopeful because I see lawyers here today, I see elected officials here today, and so many others in this room who I know from my experiences are committed to those same causes as well. I'm hopeful because I'm seeing it happen firsthand. I'm seeing more and more individuals from so many diverse backgrounds begin to seek out opportunities in the justice system. And I'm hopeful because we have the leadership of a governor in this state who's fully committed to those goals as well. Having assembled the most diverse cabinet in the state's history and perhaps the country's history, which is an integral part of his vision for a stronger and fairer New Jersey. And all of us in positions of leadership in that cabinet, in government in New Jersey, are committed to ensuring that our government, that our justice system is reflective of our diversity. So I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in today's program and to share a few thoughts with you. I'm happy to answer questions as well. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I appreciate that you talked about the increase in hate crimes across the nation, and especially you talked about here in New Jersey. And I'm sure we're all aware of the Nazi terrorist attack in Charlottesville over the summer. Do you think that, why do you think that they don't treat more of these white supremacist attacks as terrorism? And would you consider, God forbid, something like that happened in New Jersey? Would you treat something like that as terrorism?
So, we're fortunate In this state, we have one of the strongest domestic terrorism laws. And when I was county prosecutor working with Chief Anzalotti, and Prosecutor Callow is here as well, we use that law. We use that domestic terrorism law to prosecute 2 individuals who went on a hate crime spree at the end of 2011 going into 2012, in December of 2011 through the Jewish holidays into 2012, where they were painting swastikas on synagogues and schools, and it escalated in a series of conduct that ultimately resulted in the firebombing of the synagogue in Rutherford. And we charged those 2 individuals with domestic terrorism. We had we had 2 separate trials, and they are each doing, I think, 27 years? 35 years. 35 years, no early release. I think with strong deterrent sentences like that, we show that when we see this conduct, we're going to respond with all of our resources, we're going to investigate it fully, and we're going to prosecute it fully, and we're going to seek strong deterrent sentences to send a message that that type of conduct is not accepted in the state, and we're doing the same thing at the Attorney General's office. Yes, sir.
Good morning, General.
Good morning.
Do you have any thoughts about the litigation that's underway against Harvard University claiming discrimination by Asian applicants and analogizing to the way Jewish students were quoted in the early 20th century?
So you're referring, there's litigation currently pending brought by groups of Asian Americans indicating that they're being discriminated against in the application process at the more prestigious universities. I have not read the briefs in that case, so I'm not fully versed in it. So I couldn't really comment on that, but I'm aware of it. Yes, ma'am. So I think that's a good question. I think there are probably a number of answers to that when I look at it. I think sometimes you don't have the confidence to pursue a career when you don't see people in that field who look like you, and that's beginning to change. I think a lot of it is cultural, at least in my life experience. When I was growing up, it was drilled into me that I should be a good doctor or a good engineer, or if you can't be a doctor or an engineer, you might as well be a lawyer. And if you're going to be a lawyer, go make money. And so when you look at that Yale study, they said Asian Americans are more likely to pursue law firm jobs or business opportunities rather than go into public service, because it's never been sort of traditionally pushed. And a lot of that is based on the immigrant experience. You have families, and I'm sure many of you in this room share this experience, where your families have left countries to come to America to pursue economic opportunities, a better life, better educational opportunities. So sometimes it's almost, it appears to be a backsliding if you go into a public service career. And we need to change that perception, because these are important careers. It's important to give back. Like I said, that we are afforded so many benefits as being the children of immigrants that it's incumbent on us to give back and to a country that has afforded us so much. And so I think as that sort of shifts, you're seeing more and more people pursue law enforcement careers. You're seeing more and more people slowly sort of come into those roles. On the confidence point, I can't speak broadly, if there are cultural issues, but I just do think it's easier to go into a profession where you see other people like you in that profession. And it's incumbent on us who are part of this profession to make sure that there's appropriate mentorship to bring people up, to tell people in our communities that these careers are possible for them, and to really help them navigate that process. And there is discrimination in law firms. I felt it. And until that starts to change, there are always going to be those types of barriers, but we need to get past them. That's on the other hand. Yes, ma'am.
Going off of the first question that you had answered, you said that younger generations, you see that hate crimes are a lot more common. What would you say?
I'm sorry, I missed, what'd you say?
So, like, you had mentioned that younger generations, it's become a common thing to have a hate crime.
Yeah.
So, say, for example, that a severe hate crime such as bombing, et cetera, were committed by a juvenile. How exactly would that be dealt with, and do you think that fits?
That's a great question. So for juveniles, we treat juveniles obviously differently, right? Their brains aren't developed, they're not fully appreciative of the consequences of their actions, and so we have a lot of mechanisms in place in the criminal justice system. Some things don't result in juvenile charges, right? They're dealt with at the police station level. Other things are dealt with in the juvenile justice system by alternatives to incarceration for juveniles. That's always the first hope, so we don't add to the juvenile population that's incarcerated or in community homes and things of that nature. So the prosecutor is here from Bergen, he'll remember this. When we saw this uptick, right, our immediate reaction is not to charge these kids, it's to educate them. And so let me give you an example. Everyone know what sexting is, right? You guys all have cell phones. So sexting is this phenomenon where in kids, they're doing it in high schools, right? Where they're taking pictures of fellow students, whether a young lady or a young man has shared a compromising picture of him or herself with a partner, and then it sort of spreads. And technically, if it's an underage person, you're distributing child pornography, right? So when we see this type of conduct happening in the school, we don't go and arrest the kids. We go into the schools, we have a protocol in place where we inform the parents that this happened, we get the affected phones, through our detectives and our technology, we delete the content from the phones, and we have a school assembly and a program to explain to kids the consequences of this type of conduct, that it is potentially criminal, the emotional impact that it could have on their fellow students. And so we don't have anything like that for incidents of bias. We don't, if somebody took a picture of a swastika and Snapchatted it to a friend in class, we don't treat that the same way. I think we should, right? I think we should notify all the parents that this conduct is taking place in their schools. Parents have a right to know that this type of conduct, which is disgusting, is happening. And then we have to have a protocol to explain to kids that this can escalate. Because the two kids that I mentioned in that case, they were tried as adults. They committed these acts when they were in college, but they met each other in high school. And that's where these sort of thoughts are seated. And so I think we need to respond to it with education first, and we need to give children a chance to understand the consequences. And certainly if it continues, then you have to deal with it through the justice system.
Hi. So I was just, with her question is about education. Are you guys planning to also educate adults about the religions? I was a student in world religion, and I learned about Sikhism, Jainism, all the religions, and they should really learn that usually people who did terrorism, they're not even like, how do I say, what was the religion?
It's not reflective of their religion.
It's
right?
not even.
Yeah.
It's not even the religion they're claiming
Yeah.
it is. They're extremists. It's like they're the terrorism in their own country.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, oh, they're doing it for the religion, for Allah, but it's not that case. We've done even worse during the Crusades supposedly for Christ and everything like that. It's extremists. It's not even that religion. So when are we going to teach them that that's not even? I get really upset, like, oh, you're completely forgot, like you're not Arab or everything like that. That's not like, they're extremely extremists. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're from the Christian religionism. They just believe in one more prophet. That has nothing to do with that. What the extremists believe about the 72 virgins or something like that, but it's not even. So it's more of like explaining them, like about the education, that it's not even to that religion.
Yeah, I mean, so from my perspective, as the chief law enforcement officer in the state, that's not something that we could do directly. I think that's something that we do have a discussion with our Department of Education commissioner, and we are having those discussions about how we deal with incidents of bias in schools and the types of curricula that we should have in our schools to educate students about diversity and issues like that. What I do control is law enforcement training. And so there's 30,000+ law enforcement officers in this state, and so we have mandated that they are all trained on cultural diversity, on implicit bias, and on other issues, so they have a better understanding of the communities that they're interacting with. That part I can control. The other part, I agree with you. We have to have more education. We have to have more understanding of each other. Certainly, if it's in response to an event, we have worked with partners to have teaching. Like if, for example, we had an incident where there were swastikas, that were Snapchatted in one of our northern county schools here. And so we worked with the ADL on curriculum to train that person, to have somebody sit down with them, to really understand why this symbol is so repugnant and why we can't tolerate the exchange of this symbol, and we can't tolerate sending it to a Jewish student in a hateful way. And so in those individual cases, we do put together programs and curricula to address that conduct.
Now, you say you work with the police. I know they keep track of, like, for example, if a Muslim was saying about killing and stuff like that, they should keep that in track with every religion, like anybody. Because look at the students, the kid who was doing, like, mass shootings, they didn't consider that a terrorism. I believe terrorism is an act of fear.
Right.
It's to create fear. It's not just because another religion did it. I believe, like, if it's an American who did it, he's mentally disordered or mentally wrong, but not a terrorist.
Right. So to your point, we do a terrific job in this state tracking those incidents. First of all, it's a reporting issue, right? People have to report them. So we only know about those incidents that are reported to law enforcement. And so that's why one of the things that we do is we encourage and we educate communities. We do have conversations with our religious communities and town halls with all communities to talk about how important it is to report incidents of bias and hate, because it allows us to know where they're happening. It allows us to know where the next flashpoint is. And so we track it through suspicious activity reporting through our Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. And we look at that granular data and we respond. And we treat, particularly in this climate, we just tightened our reporting requirements. I think last month I issued a directive that there is no waiting anymore, right? You can't wait and sit on information if you're a local police department. If you get any credible threat that there's going to be violence or any threat of violence, regardless of who it comes from a school to a mall, to any public gathering, we now require immediate reporting to the county prosecutor and to Homeland Security, Preparedness in New Jersey, and they assess those leads. And they say, all right, Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, you're running it out, or the FBI, you run it out, but we're on top of that lead tracking. Is it perfect? We're only as perfect as the human beings who we interact with, and so if somebody doesn't report something the right way or it doesn't come to us as quickly as enough, we could miss things, but we're trying our best not to miss anything. Yes, ma'am.
I ran for council in my town, Demarest, and part of the reason I ran is because we have like a third Korean community, and I felt they needed a face like mine to represent my neighbors. And the Caucasian community was very excited, and they said, and I thought, this is great. We have a third Asian community, and they're going to vote for you, and you're going to win. So, and my father's a minister, and no Asian came out. No Koreans came out to the rallies. My sister married into a Sikh family. 2 came because they were providing the food. Then we had, and this
we're all about food.
I enjoyed it. Yeah. Homemade. So my question to you is, yes, there's a need to have a diverse face in public service, I think in entertainment, I think in certain other powerful venues. What is the secret of rallying our community to, oh, and I found out that the reason they didn't come out is many are not citizens, cannot vote. So I thought I would now target the next generation who were born in America.
Right.
But what is the secret to rallying our community? Because I'm Jewish and I teach Hebrew school
Right.
in all these temples. And all I have to say...
With that constituency, you still lost? You have the Sikhs, the Jewish community, the Korean community.
Yes, you would think, but that's also the joke. Because I ran,
Yeah.
because I like to think I'm popular, because my desire to serve
Right.
the community is very powerful, I feel that I have to pay it forward. I feel that my family in America has done very well. And I would like to share that feeling with not only my neighbors, but their children, so that my children have a life in America as I have. So, but gathering the people was difficult. There are a lot of Asian politicians who have, in New York as well, in California as well, who have trouble getting our own community together. Yes, it is an issue, but I did well, but there was that little bit that I didn't get because the idea was my Asian neighbors, my other Asian family would do something and it didn't happen. So what is the secret to rallying our community so they feel as inspired as you and I feel and other Asian politicians?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So the disclaimer is I've been in public service for a long time, but I've never run for anything. I've never raised money to run for anything. I've never been on a ballot for anything. So I have no experience with the process that you've gone through. I've seen it happen, and I think what I see and just observe happening that's been successful, voter registration, obviously getting involved at the grassroots level. My friend just won an election in Hoboken as the first Sikh mayor, right? Huge accomplishment. But I just saw that he had to knock on literally every door. I didn't see him for months and months and months. And so, I don't know what the exact secret formula is for getting people to participate in the electoral process. I would suspect a lot of it is just making it easier for them to register to vote, making it easier for them to vote, and making them appreciate the importance of voting and educating them on that. But luckily, I've avoided political life. I've been appointed and confirmed to everything I've done. But we have the freeholders here. They could fill you in on their recipe for success. Yes, sir.
Morning, Attorney General. So, as someone who's worked in Assemblyman Gordon's office in Teaneck, and I've helped a grassroots campaign down in Princeton
There you
for
go.
Mr. Zwicker, that was not the best campaign. But we're not the Attorney General. We're not federal prosecutors. We're students, right? How can we, as students, I guess, talk to people that are on the far left and the far right that kind of refuse to listen to facts when you're trying to disagree or explain something to them? How can we educate people who refuse to listen to proper argument?
Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit of having, the Attorney General's office behind me when I have these conversations. So your question is, what does the average person do? I think you just have to be armed with the facts. And at the end, I would hope, if you're having a rational conversation with somebody on the issues, that the facts prevail. And once you, draw the emotion from that argument and that conversation, but you got to be persistent, and you're not going to convince everyone. But you got to educate the people you can reach, and the ones you can't, then you sort of move on. I'll go to the new person right there. You already asked a tough question. Hi.
Regarding the current opioid epidemic within our nation, the current administration has proposed to take and use the death penalty on those caught with these drugs. And what are your thoughts on this proposal?
So I think, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, the death penalty for I think it was for not users, hopefully, but for larger scale distributors of narcotics. I have a different approach, having been a county prosecutor, having dealt with this issue, having talked to chiefs of police around this county, 70-plus chiefs of police, talking to chiefs of police who have been in law enforcement longer than I've been alive. And when those chiefs of police tell me that, prosecutor or general, we can't arrest our way out of this problem, that we can't arrest a disease, that we can't break that cycle of arrest, overdose, Narcan save, we can't prevent that next fatality through arrest, I tend to credit them. And that's what I saw when we were here in the county, and that's what I'm seeing at the Attorney General's office, that the only way you break that cycle of addiction is by treating the disease. And so we pivoted very quickly in this county when I was a prosecutor, and it's continuing now, that we weren't going to just arrest people and shame them. There was this process back in the day where you would sort of want statistics and you would want to sort of shame people. And so for years, the Bergen Record and the prosecutor's office would arrest 100 people and put their faces in the newspaper and say, hey, we're arresting and dealing with this problem. Look at all these addicts that we locked up. The problem is, if you don't treat the disease, they're going right back out to use and to buy again. And so we came to the realization that we were going to only arrest low-level users if we had an option for them, a treatment option. And so what we did was we came up with a program called Operation Helping Hand. Chief Anzalotti, who's here, was integral in that. I see Liz Rabine is here from the office. And we got together with partners. We got together with treatment providers. We got together with our health department in the county. We got together with our county elected officials, many of whom are here. And we said, we're only going to deal with this if we can get these people an option. So when we did these sweeps, because you have to do them, you have to show the drug dealers that you're out there, that you're looking at where they're selling, that you're trying to disrupt the trade. But when we brought these folks back, these people who are suffering back to our office, we had people there to talk to them, including recovering addicts called recovery specialists who are clean for a period of time, who could relate to these individuals. And we said, hey, we have an option for you. It's not in lieu of jail, but we can get you into Bergen Regional, now Newbridge, and get you into detox for 5 days if you need that. Or if you don't need detox, and we would have our specialists determine that, we can get you into an inpatient program or an outpatient program. But if you're not ready, we'll stay with you and we'll talk to you until you're ready to get into some form of treatment. And so we did a number of those initiatives, and it was remarkable that more than half the people who were arrested as part of this initiative took us up on that treatment option, right? Maybe even higher than that. And more than half of those folks were still in some form of treatment 6 months later, 8 months later, 9 months later. So that type of forced intervention, that type of, let me get you at your lowest moment, but let me also give you help instead of just shaming you and throwing you in a jail cell, that worked. And so we're taking that model from Bergen County, and as Attorney General, we're pushing it out, and in June, we're going to test it in 6 other counties. And so if we could do that in 6 other counties, and if we could do that successfully, then we're going to roll it out to all 21 counties. But the problem is there are not enough detox beds in this state. There's not enough treatment options in this state. The scope of the problem is just so immense. We lost 2,221 people to drug overdoses in 2016. Nationwide, we lost 65,000 plus people to drug overdoses. 40+ thousand of those were heroin and opioid related. This year alone already, if you go to our website, njcares.gov, which we just put up to share the numbers with the public in real time, we're already at 800 deaths. I think we've had 49 in Bergen County alone. So, the threat of death is not stopping people from using, right? They're already taking that risk each and every day when they go out to cop heroin that might have fentanyl in it and might kill them. So you're not going to scare somebody who's not afraid to die already, right? So you got to give them a better option to break that cycle.
Mr. Gerwal, thank you so much for being here. I honestly can tell that you have been one of the most impactful speakers who ever stood on that spot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My question is, what aspect of your Asian and Asian American family values or traditions have contributed to making who you are today, especially your religious and cultural roots? How do they impact your life?
That's a great question. I think I think the first thing I would say is that having been a visible minority my whole life, right? Having literally worn my religion on my face, not my sleeve, but I know what it's like to be discriminated against. I know what it's like to be bullied. I know what it's like to be physically assaulted because of the way you look. I have a tremendous degree of empathy, and I understand how deeply words and symbols can cut. So I think it's made me more empathetic as a prosecutor. When you talk about upbringing and family values and religious values, a cornerstone of the Sikh religion is seva, or selfless service to others. That's what we aspire to. And I could think of no better harmony between my tradition, which is a personal thing, and what I do publicly, which is service too. So I think it's a perfect alignment of my personal life and my public life.
And if you're willing to engage me for a second, do you have any immediate plans to move to Trenton area?
No. 160 miles round trip each day, except when you guys invite me, which is only 4 miles. So if you have anything else in the future, let me know.
So in respect of time, we'll take one last question.
Oh, okay. May I?
Yes.
All right, I'm Dottie Blakesley. I'm on the Board of Trustees here, and I bring that to your attention only because we do have a very diverse Board of Trustees. It used to be more diverse, but my friend Jermaine Ortiz here decided she wanted to be a freeholder. That's okay. But my question to you is, how do we protect freedom of speech and still not encourage biased actions and crimes as a higher ed institution?
Yeah, I mean, we're not criminalizing freedom of speech, right? That's always been a tension in these cases, and they're all fact specific. If it's me just yelling at somebody, it might not rise to a criminal event, but it is a hate incident, right? So we track it and we respond to it accordingly. But if it's me yelling at you, first of all, there's no hate crimes in New Jersey, right? It's an aggravating factor. There has to be some other crime that's motivated by hate, right? And they're delineated in our statutes, and those become the bias crimes and bias incidents that we charge. So there's no specific criminalization of hate. If you commit these 6 or 7 other crimes and your motive is some sort of bias or hate against a person or based on a protected class, then it's an aggravating factor when you charge that case. So of course you have to assess where you cross that line, and it's highly fact specific. We're not criminalizing people having open discussion. If they want open discussion and be hateful, fine. But if you're hateful and you go out and insult somebody, that's a criminal event. If you're hateful and you go out and create graffiti, that's a hate crime. If you go out and cut your neighbor's power off and slash his tires because you don't like his religion or their religion. So there's a distinction. Certainly people should have open discussion on college campuses. I spoke at Rutgers recently on hate and bias incidents. It was a full day panel, and they had somebody in the audience just heckling the whole time and calling the speakers racist and calling the speakers names and bigoted comments. Rutgers didn't remove him. They shouldn't have, unless he was bringing the event to a standstill or otherwise overly disruptive, but he was exercising his First Amendment right, which we respect. It's a foundational right in this country. So, we have to be very careful not to trample on our constitutional liberties. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to revisit for a second her comment about the opioid issue. In addition to opioids, there's a growing issue of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of initiative in place to help mental health patients get any sort of treatment? A lot of mental health also results in addiction and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, the cost of a day in a mental health institution, a hospital, a residential treatment center is anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500 per day. Is there any sort of help in place or that will be in place for people that are suffering from mental health issues?
So I could, I think the second part of your question is probably more appropriate for our health commissioner in the state. But to answer your first question, I would say that law enforcement in Bergen County and generally in the state are ahead of the curve on dealing with mental health issues. We want to get people with mental health issues out of the criminal justice system and into the mental health system and the treatment system. So in this county, we have a training for law enforcement called crisis intervention training and de-escalation training. So when you interact with somebody Officers are being trained to recognize that that person might not be disobeying your commands. He or she might be going through a mental health crisis where they can't appreciate, because of what's going on, what you're asking them to do. So it might not be resisting. So instead of meeting them with force or aggression, you might want to engage in these verbal techniques that you're being taught. But more importantly, those trainings are collaborative. So you have law enforcement and you have treatment providers and you have mental health professionals in the same room, right? And that's because you want those relationships. When someone's going through a crisis and you finally calm them down, you don't want to then lock them up unless, if they committed a crime and there's obviously aggravating factors. But if you can divert that person who was just disobeying your commands because they were going through some sort of episode, and then call the person you met in your training or through these relationships and get them into the mental health system, that's our goal, to decrease the jail population of individuals with mental health problems and to put them into treatment where they belong. That's something we are also doing statewide, these de-escalation type trainings. I agree with you. With opioid abuse, I mean, it is at once a chronic disease and also a behavioral problem, and we have to treat it as such. And we need to put more dollars behind it because there are proven treatments for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
From all of us here, I'd like to truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank Gurveer Garewal to be here and to be sharing his insight and thoughts in his journey as he assumed the office of Attorney General in the state of New Jersey. When you assumed the office, and I quote, you said, "I'm a proud son of New Jersey, and we are proud of you that you have made and are to the top leadership, and you're determined to change the face of that leadership, bring many more diverse faces there, and your creative work is truly admired in terms of work such as you mentioned, Operation Helping Hand, and many others. You really are an inspiration for us, and we hope that many of you would follow his footsteps and pursue a career in the judicial system. And now I would like to invite Greg Fencott, the coordinator of student development, to help me present plaque of honor and a shawl in a very traditional way to Gurveer Garewal.
Oh, thank you. This is going to get them roused up on social media for sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much.
On behalf of Asian Heritage Committee, I thank you all for attending this event and being part of the Asian Heritage Month celebration. It's truly a rewarding experience being with all of you and with our special guest this day. And the celebrations continue with the 50-year celebration. That's the open house from 3 to 7. Join us at those events that are being planned throughout the day. Thank you.